Let's cut through the noise. For decades, the West has spoken and the world has listened. But when Donald Trump tried that with India, he didn't get silence. He didn't get submission. He got a reply so sharp, so chilling, that it sent shockwaves through Washington, London, and beyond. This wasn't just another diplomatic exchange. This was a moment when India looked the West in the eye and said, "We are not here to be lectured. We are here to be heard." Donald Trump has always been a leader who thrives on provocation. His political persona was built on bluntness, disruption, and the ability to throw his opponents off balance with short, sharp, and often controversial statements. Unlike many traditional politicians who carefully measure every word, Trump deliberately chose to communicate in a manner that was unfiltered, forceful, and designed to command attention. This style extended beyond America's domestic politics and spilled into his handling of international affairs, where he often treated global diplomacy like one of his campaign rallies: direct, transactional, and unapologetically America first. For countries like India, this was both a challenge and an opportunity. The challenge came from the unpredictability of his remarks, while the opportunity lay in redefining the terms of engagement with the United States on a more equal footing. When Trump directed his words toward India, they were rarely coated with diplomacy. He made statements about trade imbalances, tariffs, defense purchases, and India's independent foreign policy decisions, often painting them as if India owed compliance to the US. He saw the relationship through the lens of deals, where America must always come out on top. For example, he repeatedly highlighted the trade deficit between the US and India, framing it as unfair. His approach was not unique to India. He did the same with allies like Germany, Japan, and even NATO as a whole. But with India, it carried a particular sting because New Delhi was rising as a global power and expected to be treated as such. Trump's comments suggested that he believed India would ultimately bend to American pressure if he spoke loudly enough. That assumption underestimated the new assertiveness of India's leadership and the seasoned diplomacy of people like Jaishankar. Trump's provocations also played into a long-standing pattern of how the West has historically engaged with countries outside its traditional power bloc. The expectation has often been that these nations, while valuable as partners, would adjust their policies to suit Western priorities rather than the other way around. In this sense, Trump was not breaking from history. He was amplifying it with his characteristic bluntness. But the global stage had changed. India was not the same country it had been decades earlier, quietly receiving directions. It was now the world's fifth largest economy, a nuclear power, and an influential voice in international organizations. When Trump spoke to India in a way that implied dominance, he was not speaking to a subordinate nation. He was speaking to a peer, one that had every intention of pushing back if its interests were misrepresented or undermined. This dynamic is what set the stage for Jaishankar's famously sharp and composed replies, which many in the West found shocking precisely because they had become so used to hearing silence or appeasement in response to American pressure. Jaishankar, India's External Affairs Minister, has earned a reputation on the global stage as a diplomat who combines clarity with composure, a rare quality in modern international politics. Unlike leaders or representatives who often fall into the trap of emotional responses or defensive justifications, Jaishankar approaches his role with remarkable precision. His style is rooted in the principle that diplomacy is not about volume but about weight, not about how loudly one speaks, but how deeply one's words resonate. When confronted with criticism or aggressive questioning, especially from Western counterparts, his responses are calm, deliberate, and almost surgical in their effect. He dismantles arguments not with shouting or rhetoric, but with facts, logic, and a tone so measured that it leaves his audience with little room for rebuttal. This approach has not only strengthened India's diplomatic position, but has also enhanced the perception of India as a country that refuses to be cornered or spoken down to on the global stage. His effectiveness comes from decades of experience in the Foreign Service, where he served in key roles in Washington, Beijing, and other important capitals. This exposure gave him an insider's understanding of how major powers operate and how they attempt to influence or pressure emerging countries. As a result, Jaishankar developed a style that is both assertive and unflappable. For instance, when asked probing or even accusatory questions about India's foreign policy choices, he often turns the tables with a simple but profound statement that highlights the double standards or selective narratives of the West. Instead of reacting defensively, he calmly reframes the debate, making the questioner appear unprepared or biased. This precision has made many of his remarks go viral internationally, with clips circulating across media platforms where his firm but polite tone carries more impact than a fiery exchange ever could. It is this ability to command respect without raising his voice that many describe as chilling, not because it is hostile, but because it is disarmingly effective in silencing critics. India's assertiveness on the global stage has grown steadily over the past 2 decades, transforming the way it is perceived by both allies and competitors. No longer content with being seen as a passive participant in international politics, India has begun to define its own narrative and insist on policies that serve its national interest first. This shift is not sudden but the result of economic growth, military modernization, and a rising sense of national confidence. India has become the world's 5th largest economy, a nuclear power, and a crucial hub in global trade and technology. With this rise has come a natural change in posture. Where once India might have carefully avoided offending powerful nations, today it is far more comfortable saying no, drawing boundaries, and rejecting the idea that its decisions must be validated by Western capitals. This assertiveness is not aggression, but rather a refusal to be spoken for, a determination to occupy its place at the table as a power that cannot be ignored or dictated to. This assertiveness can be observed in multiple areas, from foreign policy to defense, trade, and even climate negotiations. In foreign policy, India has adopted a multi-aligned approach, engaging with the United States, Russia, the European Union, and regional powers such as Japan and Australia, all while maintaining its own strategic independence. For example, India has made it clear that it will continue to pursue strong ties with Russia despite Western criticism, particularly regarding defense and energy supplies. In trade, India has resisted pressure to open its markets at terms that do not benefit its people, and it has walked away from large international agreements, such as the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, when it felt the arrangement would be unfair. On climate change, India has asserted that while it is committed to sustainable growth, it will not allow itself to be unfairly burdened with obligations that historically belong to industrialized nations. These positions reflect a country that weighs international expectations, but ultimately acts according to its own priorities. India's assertiveness has also been visible in the way it responds to criticism, whether it concerns human rights, border policies, or economic practices. Indian officials no longer avoid difficult conversations. Instead, they respond with clarity, pointing out inconsistencies in the criticisms they face and highlighting their own perspective with authority. This has surprised many in the West, who had grown used to more muted responses. The change reflects a broader understanding that India's voice carries weight in the modern world, and that it need not shrink from disagreement. By asserting itself, India signals to both its partners and its rivals that it is a power in its own right, one that chooses its path rather than having it chosen for them. This growing confidence is central to its evolving role in global politics, and it explains why moments like Jaishankar's responses to Western leaders resonate so strongly. They embody a larger shift in India's identity on the world stage. The geopolitical shock factor surrounding India's rise lies in the way its responses challenge long-standing assumptions about how power is distributed and exercised in the international system. For decades, the West has been accustomed to smaller or developing nations yielding to its positions, often adjusting policies to align with the expectations of Washington, London, or Brussels. The narrative has been that the West sets the agenda while others follow, sometimes willingly and sometimes reluctantly, but rarely with open defiance. India disrupts that pattern. Its assertiveness, combined with its sheer size, growing economy, and strategic location, has created a dynamic where Western powers cannot simply assume compliance. This has been particularly evident when India refuses to follow instructions on matters like foreign policy alignments, energy purchases, or trade decisions. When questioned or pressured, India's calm but firm refusals surprise observers who expect concessions. That shock factor is amplified by the manner in which Indian leaders like Jaishankar articulate their positions with precision, leaving little room for counter-argument and challenging the presumption that the West holds the upper hand. The sense of shock also stems from the speed at which India has grown into this role. Within a single generation, the country has moved from being seen as a struggling post-colonial economy to being one of the world's fastest-growing nations and a technology powerhouse. This transformation has caught many by surprise, particularly those who still viewed India through outdated lenses of dependency. The idea that India could push back against the United States or the European Union with confidence or reject trade frameworks that did not serve its interests unsettles traditional expectations. Western governments and media outlets are often quick to highlight these moments because they illustrate a world order where influence is no longer flowing in one direction. For policymakers who have been accustomed to setting terms, India's defiance feels disruptive, almost rebellious, even though it is simply the natural expression of a maturing power asserting equality. What adds to the shock factor is the contrast between India's style and that of other rising nations. While some states push back through aggressive rhetoric or confrontational posturing, India relies on measured diplomacy and carefully chosen words. This makes its defiance more striking. When Jaishankar or other Indian representatives calmly reject demands or point out double standards, the impact is greater because it is not framed as anger, but as certainty. The silence that often follows such responses highlights how unprepared many in the West are to deal with an India that is no longer deferential. Instead of a country seeking validation, they are confronted with one that confidently positions itself as a peer. That change unsettles established power hierarchies and forces a re-evaluation of how the West engages with emerging powers. The geopolitical shock, therefore, is not just about India's words or actions, but about the realization that the era of unquestioned Western dominance is steadily being eroded by countries willing to chart their own path. The chilling element in Jaishankar's style lies in his ability to completely alter the tone of a conversation without ever raising his voice. Unlike leaders who rely on forceful rhetoric or dramatic gestures to make a point, he embodies a form of quiet power that unsettles opponents far more than loud confrontation ever could. When asked difficult or provocative questions, his responses are delivered with such calm precision that they feel like a cold wave sweeping through the room. There is no anger, no defensive tone, and no loss of composure, only a carefully chosen set of words that dismantle the premise of the question itself. This makes his replies feel almost surgical, leaving his audience with no clear opening for rebuttal. To those accustomed to heated political exchanges, the effect can be disarming, even intimidating, because it demonstrates total control. In that sense, the chilling quality comes not from aggression, but from restraint, a reminder that true authority often requires no theatrics at all. This quality is amplified by the contrast between expectation and reality. Western journalists, analysts, and leaders often approach India with the assumption that sharp criticism or pressure will force defensive explanations. Instead, they encounter a figure who refuses to be rattled and instead flips the narrative back onto the questioner. For example, when challenged on India's purchase of oil from Russia, despite Western sanctions, Jaishankar calmly pointed out that Europe had been buying far more for months, and yet it was India being questioned. The delivery was factual, polite, but also cutting, exposing the double standard without hostility. The room grows still in such moments because the criticism collapses under the weight of logic, and the calm delivery ensures that the point cannot be dismissed as emotional rhetoric. That silence, that pause after his words, is where the chilling effect is most strongly felt. It is the silence of realization, the recognition that an assumption has been shattered in public view. The chilling element also reflects a deeper shift in power dynamics. In the past, leaders from developing countries often felt compelled to justify their policies in ways that aligned with Western expectations. Jaishankar's approach rejects that entirely, replacing deference with unapologetic clarity. This unsettles critics because it signals that India will not only chart its own course, but also openly call out inconsistencies when pressured. The fact that this is done without hostility only makes it more effective because there is no easy way to dismiss his words as defiance. Instead, they resonate as reasoned truths that demand acknowledgement. It is this blend of composure, logic, and unshakable confidence that creates the chilling aura. For many in the West, the experience of being confronted by such responses is a stark reminder that India is no longer a country to be lectured, but one to be listened to. And that realization is what makes his statements echo long after they are spoken. The educational value of Jaishankar's statements and India's responses to Western pressure lies in the way they illuminate the mechanics of modern diplomacy, the dynamics of global power, and the role of narrative in shaping international relations. For students of politics and international studies, his approach offers a living case study in how a country can assert sovereignty without alienating others, and how measured communication can often be more effective than aggressive posturing. Every interaction, every carefully chosen word provides lessons on clarity, strategy, and the subtle use of language as a tool of influence. Unlike theoretical models found in textbooks, these moments are real-time examples of power being exercised through rhetoric, where diplomacy is not about avoiding conflict, but about redefining the terms of engagement. Observing these exchanges helps learners understand that global politics is not only about armies and economies, but also about the ability to control narratives and challenge assumptions with authority. Another dimension of educational value lies in the contrast between India's current stance and its past. Historically, India often found itself in a defensive posture, seeking validation from larger powers and working within the framework set by others. Today, the shift to confident self-assertion provides a clear lesson on how nations evolve as their capabilities grow. It demonstrates how economic development, technological progress, and military strength translate into diplomatic confidence, and how this confidence changes the way a country is treated internationally. For scholars, this offers an opportunity to track the connection between internal growth and external positioning. For aspiring diplomats, it highlights the importance of preparation, composure, and the ability to deliver arguments that cannot be easily dismissed. It shows that success in international relations does not come from confrontation alone, but from crafting responses that resonate as both reasonable and firm. Finally, the educational aspect extends to the audience itself, particularly in the West. For decades, many citizens of Western countries were taught to see international politics through the lens of their own government's dominance, assuming that smaller or developing nations would inevitably comply with Western demands. Jaishankar's replies and India's broader diplomatic behavior serve as a corrective, reminding audiences that the world is multipolar and that respect must flow in all directions. For students and analysts, this shift teaches humility in global affairs and emphasizes the importance of listening to perspectives outside the traditional centers of power. It also underscores that in the 21st century, equality in dialogue is becoming a defining feature of international politics. The educational value, therefore, is not only for India but for the world at large, as it illustrates that diplomacy today requires adaptability, balance, and an acceptance that influence is no longer unidirectional. These are vital lessons for anyone seeking to understand the complexities of modern global relations and the changing structure of world order. In the end, what this entire episode truly reveals is not just a clash of words between Trump and Jaishankar, but a deeper transformation in how India engages with the world. It is the story of a nation that has outgrown the role of being lectured to, stepping confidently into the role of a power that sets its own terms. Jaishankar's calm, precise, and unshakable replies are more than just diplomatic soundbites. They are symbols of India's new identity, one that demands equality in dialogue and commands respect through logic rather than volume. For the West, the shock lies in realizing that old hierarchies no longer apply, that the era of unquestioned dominance is fading, and that a multipolar world is no longer theory but reality. For India, it is a declaration that its voice carries weight, its choices are sovereign, and its future will not be written by others. This, ultimately, is the chilling message. India is not here to follow, it is here to lead, and the world must now adjust to that truth.